know. So the talk today, I've just named it Resilient and Energy Efficient Faith Communities. So, and the reason the two are together is that we really need to think about our energy consumption during times of crisis, whether that be floods, heat waves, whatever. So if we can understand our energy systems and our energy usage, that creates the opportunities to figure out what services we can deliver if that's what we wish to do. So first off, a pyramid. This is a super cool, super nerdy pyramid, but I do like it a lot. Now it's a residential version. It came from Minnesota Power years ago, but it's actually an excellent, excellent resource. And with any building, we always start with a good foundation. And so the pyramid of conservation really looks at the bottom first when we're looking at energy efficiency. You'll see at the very top, it says renewable energy, that's solar and wind power. That's what everyone thinks when we think about energy efficiency and going green and environmental stuff. Oh yeah, let's put some solar panels on top. Cool, super cool idea. However, it's not the most economical thing to do out of the gate. And so this pyramid starts at the bottom with an understanding, and then some low cost, no cost, and then lighting and moving through. And so I'm going to go kind of through it today in this order to help you understand where the opportunities lie and the challenges, lie for your building as well. And the first is actually knowing your energy. You actually really need to know how much energy you're consuming. That's not just your dollars, which is important, of course, but it's actually your kilowatt hours of electricity month to month, your cubic meters of gas month to month. Getting your head around those energy stats to see, are you consuming more energy in winter or summer or in the shoulder seasons? If you don't know, you can't manage what you don't measure. And so Energy Star for congregations, awesome website, awesome free tools, and they can actually even help you get into Energy Star Portfolio Manager, which is pretty cool software. It's free. Paid for by your government, and my government pays your government so that we can use it in Canada too, because it's that awesome. And so
I'll put the links to that. That's a free resource, and I'll put the link in the chat box and send that out to folks when as a follow-up to the webinar.
Awesome. Thank you, Lucy. So I do recommend checking out the website, Energy Star for Congregations. Great site, lots of resources. One of the resources they have is the Energy Star Action Workbook for Congregations on the right-hand side. And this is a free PDF. You can download it. And they also have a totally fun treasure map, energy efficiency treasure map document as well. So you can use either of these tools to walk around your building and try to figure out where some opportunities lie. And they're really great book. Like I said, it's free. And they also are really amazing in that they co-brand with certain organizations, and NYDIS could actually probably co-brand with this. We're the only Canadian organization that co-branded with the US EPA on this because it's a great, great tool. And that one is free. The next thing to really think about is trying to understand your energy by doing a walkabout. And the do-it-yourself energy audit is really a great, great first step. Just getting a sense of how many light bulbs do you have? How many are LEDs? How old is your furnace? Do you have any insulation in your attic? Do you have an attic? These kind of questions can be really simple. And taking kind of an inventory can really help you see where you're at from an economic perspective, both just, how can we improve it? But, if your furnace is from 1950, it may be on its last leg. And so you don't want to be surprised with an economic impact of having to replace the furnace when you're not expecting it. So it can be really useful. On our website, and I should mention, I work with Faith in the Common Good. We are a multi-faith national nonprofit out of Canada. As Lucy mentioned, we used to be colleagues. She used to be the executive director there. And we work with faith communities all over Canada. So we've actually created a do-it-yourself energy audit guidebook. It's another free resource. and another PDF you can just download. And what I like about that one and the Energy Star workbook for congregations is there's a lot in the beginning of why should I look at LEDs? Why should I look at programmable thermostats? And really helps that explanation helps walk people who may not be building experts as to why it's important. And that's helpful around the board table when someone may spearhead this and the other people don't know what a heat pump is or don't care, which is fine. And this creates a language of understanding for everybody. So I like those. We personally, our organization delivers a virtual green audit via Zoom like this. So me sitting here at my desk and you walking around your faith community building on a tablet or an iPhone, showing me all the cool stuff and the good and the bad and the ugly, and me mostly trying not to throw up if you're jiggling the phone around. But that can be really helpful to have an expert come in and in that cost-effective way to do that. Now the NYDIS, that's the accelerator program, which we're going to hear about afterwards. There's some free opportunities there for you folks right now, and we will hear about that once I'm done. Energy audits, those are typically a fee for service, unless there's some sort of grant program that is available. But an energy audit is a real deep, kind of a walkthrough audit, focusing on energy and really getting a sense of payback. Where's the financial opportunities? And so that's sort of the next level up. And then engineering audits, those are like really expensive. Those are ones that are like kind of capital campaign, major renovation kind of stuff, where an engineer is going to calculate the payback on every single light bulb and whatnot in the building. And so when we see the spectrum going from free to big projects, not one is the best fit. Not one is the only answer. It depends on where you are within your house of worship and your congregation and what your goals are. But these are different tools available to you. So these help you understand your building better if you don't have the expertise in-house. So moving up the pyramid from knowing and then starting some basic stuff like lights and air sealing. The lights here we can see, we want to move them to LED lights. And why is that? Well, a big halogen lights and whatnot, especially like in the gym or maybe some in the sanctuaries, consume a lot of energy. Now, during a power outage, during an event, a disaster event, we want to use the least amount of energy possible for whatever service we're thinking about providing. And if you're using honking big light bulbs, that's going to be an impact. That's going to cost a lot of energy, and the infrastructure to turn those on internally becomes expensive. So thinking about LED lights, think about battery backups for exit lights. If the power goes out, really, really important. The air sealing. So on the image on the right-hand side, we can see the big hole in the ceiling. It's about 4 feet across, maybe a little bit bigger. That is a giant vent into the attic. And so hot air rises, right? And so we have the biggest buildings in town, oftentimes with the older faith communities. And then we have this chimney effect, and we can lose tremendous amounts of heating dollars up those holes, and then up the steeple or the minaret or whatever. And so we can lose tremendous amount of heating energy and heating dollars. And so if we're trying to be a place in wintertime of respite, that's making it hard. That's making it hard to keep it warm because we're losing the energy. So thinking about air sealing, thinking about your building as a colander, right? And the more we can plug the holes, the more easier it is and the more cost effective it is to heat and cool. So the same way in the summertime, if we're losing a lot of air conditioned air up holes like that, that's bringing in hot, humid air into the building, and that's creating discomfort, especially if we're a respite station. And on the left is an attic hatch, and air sealing the attic hatch, even at your own house. If you're in a home, can really insulate, but also air seal, helping to keep the conditioned air that you're paying for inside the building. So those are really important steps and really cost effective out of the gate. When we move up the next step on the pyramid, we start looking at appliances. Now, if you are rocking a Harvest Gold fridge there, or even older, the 1950s fridge. These
Hey,
are
Stephen,
yes, please.
we have a question in the
Awesome.
chat box. Brenda, do you want to just read it out about ceiling before we go on?
Yeah, please, please. Thanks.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Stephen. So I was just before you went on, when you're talking about creating an airtight environment in the building, aren't you running afoul of our increased sensitivity about ventilation for health concerns like COVID and whatever else might be coming down the pike?
Excellent question, Brenda. I really appreciate you thinking in that realm, because I'm also an air quality consultant. So I'm a nerd on a lot of levels. Typically speaking, if we're looking at a tradition, I'm going to say traditional house of worship, freestanding, church, mosque, synagogue. And typically, if they're older than 1980, as with many are, most are, creeping towards 100 years, there is no way that you will ever make that airtight enough, no matter what you do. They're a giant pincushion of air leakage. What we want to do is capture the monster holes, like this hole in the ceiling, and really try to scale down the cubic yards of air per minutes leaving in the dead of winter. Okay, because that's really how much air leakage can happen in a 100-year-old building, faith community, because of the giant volumes. Stack effect increases. And Brenda, I saw in your photo there, looks like a firefighting. So we understand, I think you understand that sense of that science more than I do. That volume, that stack effect is huge within the buildings. And the more we can overcome it, at least we can try to contain it to a minimum. We're in better shape energy-wise. From a COVID perspective, typically within a house of worship, such as a large space like this, the ventilation, the air exchange still within a large volume like that, from an aerosol perspective, someone coughing and whatnot, chances are definitely a lot lower than if you were in an 8-foot ceiling space. And which, like if we're in a neighborhood church or, a repurposed, street front, streetscape kind of house of worship, definitely, the ventilation does need to be increased. But where we want to increase air exchange and ventilation, we want to be able to manage it where we want it to happen. Because for every cubic yard that leaves through this hole, there's a cubic yard that's coming in down at the bottom of this building in a dirty old dark place. So we're pulling in dirty air. So when we want proper ventilation, it's managed like a window or a door or some sort of exhaust fan situation, that we're actually getting better air quality because we know where it's actually coming from. So we want to keep both those details in mind. Does that help?
Yeah, I just wanted to raise the issue because I know it's going to be top of mind for people when you start talking about, limiting air escape. So
yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, super cool. Super excellent question and super topical as we're opening buildings back up. But again, if we can go from cubic meters of air per minutes to Canadian cubic yards of air per minutes of loss to cubic yards of air per hour, we'd still be doing really great from a ventilation rate. And we would still be seeing comfort levels and COVID concerns addressed. Yep, thank you. So the old fridges, this is super common in houses of worship, that we are rocking seriously old fridges. Why? Well, because they won't die, first off. But second, they've been donated by someone lovely, someone who cares about the congregational space and the kitchen. And they donated that one because it's still working when they went out and bought their energy efficient one for the house. And so financially, these can cost a lot of money. And so we just really want to keep that in mind, especially if we're looking at generation. Fridges are often one of the appliances that we do want to see powered during disaster respite situations. To keep milk or baby formula or something like that cold. or drinks if it's a heat wave issue. And this is going to take like an extra generator just to power these beasts, because they just draw so much energy. So when thinking about that, we really want to think about, you know, a new Energy Star rated fridge and freezer to be able to manage the situation and manage the energy. And also, if the power goes out, cover them with blankets to help keep them insulated as long as humanly possible, if we're not using them and just trying to save the food that's in there. The hot water tank on the right. Certainly, we want to see all those copper pipes insulated, right? We want to see that hot water, wherever it's being delivered, actually getting to the location, because trying to heat this closet or the basement boiler room or whatever, it's terribly inefficient unless we're all hanging out in the boiler room, which I don't recommend. So we want to be insulating the supplies. And then if they are gas or electric, we want to make sure that they are operational and that they are insulated, the tank, safely and properly, especially with gas appliances. But if it's an electric hot water tank, we can insulate them, again, to keep that hot water there longer with less and less power requirements. So really important. Okay. Gas stoves. I know we see lots of these garlands in various houses of worship. In a power outage, in a disaster situation, these can be a benefit because you may be able to light them by hand. Okay. And so that can create an opportunity to actually provide food during a power outage. Now, the challenge is you no longer have ventilation working if you don't have the hood in place and operational due to a power outage, which means there is a huge amount of combustion products coming off of these. And that can lead to carbon monoxide poisoning. Okay. So dead volunteers cannot cook pancakes very effectively. Okay. So this is a very serious issue. Typically, certainly in Canada, the fire marshal should be inspecting these. And we want to keep in mind that safety feature. So this is an interesting opportunity, but you have to have some serious ventilation in place and figure that out. And people need to understand the signs and symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning, because it is absolutely deadly. The bad is gas stoves are terrible. They off gas combustion products, especially the old ones where the pilot lights don't go out. They're not electronic, so there's always a pilot light. I walked into a house of worship 3 weeks ago. They hadn't been in the kitchen in weeks, and I walk in and it just hits me, this wall of gas. So these can be real health issues, and especially past COVID when places were closed. So they are a definite air quality issue and a health and safety issue. The problem is, just like the fridges, these garlands, you can't kill them. They will go and go, and you can get them tweaked and fixed up, and maybe some of them put electronic ignitions in them, which from a long-term operational safety is definitely better, and energy consumption. But you also want to think about, from a power out disaster, that kind of opportunity with serious caveats to them. Okay. Moving up the pyramid, we then get to insulation and mechanicals. So actually insulating the building can help you from both heat and cold. So I know New York has experienced both, but also thinking about the mechanicals from a flooding perspective, which is definitely a very realistic concern within New York City. Are they going to survive if they get wet? You know, the ones on the left, if they get wet, well, water's definitely getting in them, right? And then your mechanicals have the potential to grow mold. You can have sewage, you could have seawater, you could have a myriad of things in them, none of which is healthy. Ones on the right may float and could be set up that way as well, but also that they're airtight. And so they could handle the situation possibly better with a specific type of installation. So these are questions to think about. Are we going to be running the mechanicals? What happens to the basement during a flood? What is in the basement? And just having that mindfulness, you know, if you're thinking about offering services during a power outage of some degree, if it's a flooding issue, what's important in your basement? I can tell you, you've got all your your faith community's records in the basement in a closet in the back corner. I know you do, because I've been to your house of worship, right? Everybody puts their important stuff in the lowest point possible in the building. That's where we store everything. So we want to think about, you know, the insulation and the mechanicals, how they work during a flood, but we also want to think about our really special stuff. You know, the important paperwork, the heritage, the history of your house of worship. It's literally in the most delicate and disaster-prone location in your building. So keep those in mind. Heat pumps. These are becoming more and more common. We're seeing them in more and more houses of worship coast to coast in Canada. And I know they're being installed in New York as well. So heat pumps are incredibly efficient electrical supplied to provide heating and cooling in one package. Now, these are called mini splits. And so these are the heads that are split from the compressor, and the compressor is outside and looks smaller, but similar to an air conditioner compressor outside. Usually have a sense of it, but even way more efficient than an air conditioner. And there's different versions. These happen to be mini splits. You can have them tied into your existing ductwork and a new furnace blower, for example. But providing that air conditioning, as many houses of worship, you know, historically obviously didn't have air conditioning. They had heating, but no air conditioning. And now with the climate changing, the ability to provide a cooling room is one of those opportunities that faith communities could provide. So this doesn't have to be your whole building, but maybe it's a certain area of your building that you could put some heat pumps in to make it more comfortable, and an area of respite where people can get off the street and into the shade and into a cool building. Now, again, if your building is a big old 100-year-old building, you literally have tons of thermal mass in the construction, and that will hold the cool in the building longer, assuming we plug the holes. So there can be some benefits to some of the architecture and some of the structures. Not all of them, of course. There's too much variety within New York City, but heat pumps can be are an economical way to move off of fuel burning appliances with the climate crisis, but also from an energy perspective and a service delivery perspective can create in one package, offer more opportunities for you for heating and cooling, so more comfort all year round at an economical cost to operate. And yeah, insulation. So as you know, I'm Canadian. You can tell by my accent. But even us Canadians make some mistakes sometime and don't really understand their buildings. So this is a church in Saskatchewan. So I want you to think North Dakota and then drive a couple 100 miles north. Okay. So this is like really, really cold. Now they were complaining that their front entrance here at their house of worship was really cold, and they wanted to upgrade it, and they were going to fix some stuff. So I was like, that's great, because I'm helping them with it. And turns out when they opened up the wall, there wasn't any insulation in the wall. So no wonder it was freezing cold. So my point is that even as Canadians, something is what should be standard practice is insulation in our building wasn't there. And so understanding your building really is important in whatever method and process that you can figure out, right? Whether it's a do-it-yourself or you're hiring someone to help you. With the accelerator program, sounds like a great idea to help give you some basic knowledge, because what seems obvious may not be, and what you don't know can hurt you in this case. All right. Now, when we get near the top of the pyramid, that's where we're looking at generation. And so in that efficiency pyramid, we're looking at the solar. And of course, here's a church with the cross and solar panels, pretty fun design. They were really proud of themselves being able to afford to do that, and sends a great message to the community. Solar can be a great option in really specific locations, and certainly with the density of New York City and the skyscraper situation, the ability for you to actually have enough light to gain a solar panel could be really tricky. Direct light to actually gain value. It's not impossible, but it comes with the challenge of the cityscape. This is a little more rural, and that's why they can do it. But if we're thinking about generating power for a power outage to supply services, the typical generator in the top left corner, a gas powered generator is pretty standard. Please, 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 please. And I know Brenda's looking at it and squinting. Yes, that is a gas powered generator inside a building. Do not do that. Again, the exhaust can be deadly with carbon monoxide poisoning. So they must be outside when running and secured so that they don't grow legs and walk off. But that can provide a certain amount of electricity to your building. On a very temporary scale, right? Someone's putting gas in it, someone's carrying out, someone's starting it up, someone's watching it. But that can work quite effectively and be cost effective to offer some basic services out of your house of worship. The bottom two here, the Generac, I don't care what brand you use, but these are permanent installations for alternative power. And they're oftentimes gas. For you in New York City, they'd be gas powered. And the gas generator is then connected to an electrical generator and connects to your electrical panel, as you can see. And literally, if the power goes out, that starts up automatically and powers a certain number of circuits within the building. So obviously, a lot more upfront cost, but technically does its own thing. So you don't have to mess with it during power outage. So,
Stephen, can I ask a question? If you, just going back to the emergency power generation, if you go on Amazon, there are a lot of kind of do-it-yourself setups that have batteries that are solar powered, or you plug them into your car, or what's your, obviously the size would depend on the need of your building. And they're small, but in terms of quality and effectiveness, what would you say about that?
Yeah, not a lot. It's a challenge, right? Some of them could be really great quality, and some of them could be just absolute crap. So it's a real challenge. I love Wirecutter, right? From your New York City newspaper, right? The New York Times. I think Wirecutter is for some of us who are old enough, the old Consumer Reports and recommendations. Really do your research, and definitely don't be following strictly up Amazon ratings, because there's a lot of robots involved in that. You really want to be thinking about, one of those little portable panels and a little battery pack. You're going to be charging phones and maybe some laptops with that. That's kind of the limit of what you're going to be doing with those. You definitely want to be talking to a licensed electrician, New York licensed electricians, and making sure that definitely if you're mucking with your building panel, that it is done by a competent person and not just some person, definitely. So buyer beware, I guess, is the short answer to that. So when we switch to the issues of during a disaster, the questions are, what kind of services do you want to provide? Are you just providing shelter, like just out of the rain, out of the snow, out of the heat, and some basic services like, a cup of coffee and a cell phone charging? Which covers a huge amount of opportunity for people. You don't need a lot of energy generation, right? Some lights, coffee maker, or be able to charge the phones. Or are you going next level and providing food, right? So now we need refrigeration, we need cooking, serving, cleaning, hot water, all those things. And then overnight shelter gets more and more complicated, right? Because now you need washrooms, and you need all that kind of stuff. So again, it's a spectrum of what you can offer, but you can't offer any of these if you don't understand, the power that goes into each of them. So understanding your power needs. This panel will not help you do much. Do not touch this panel. How much power do you need to meet your goals? How much power do you currently use? Again, so back to the very beginning. How much energy are you consuming? How much more or less would be consumed during the emergency? Because don't remember, your building's also under the same duress that everyone else is experiencing. So do you need more sump pumps, more stoves, more lights, whatever? What do you need just to be operational? And how long will you need the power per day? So what are you delivering? Are you open during lunch hour and dinner for, or 3 hours or whatever to charge phones because you got a couple of solar panels and a battery pack you can put on the front step, or more than that? And fuel supplies. So if you're running a generator, you need gas. And can you get gas? Right? These are really real questions when we think about moving from beyond, we're here, to then moving to the next. So, and then thinking about your building's limitations and opportunities. So these two I found on Google, noodling around New York City, which is a lovely way to visit. Church of Our Lady of Sorrows on Stanton Street. This is a good old solid church. This one can be high and dry in a flooding situation, certainly on the main floor. So that could be an opportunity. Big space, lots of volume, lots of thermal mass, probably could hold a lot of heat and or cool in those extreme temperature places, but not accessible necessarily if we have to get into the top doors. Looks like there's some ground floor, those maybe doors or windows, I'm not sure. So these are questions about accessibility during times of duress as well. On the right-hand side in Bleecker Street, the neighborhood church, right? This street front, this storefront church, super accessible, lots of walk-by traffic, right? So, but they may not even own this building, they could be renting. So again, can they be making modifications, stuff like that? What can they be doing? So what services can they be offering under the situation that they may not even be owning the building as a storefront? And so these are realistic examples, but both can be offering services, right? Both can be providing respite during extreme weather events in their own way. But just understanding what are those opportunities and understanding what those challenges are. All right. And so with that, I love this photo, gentleman doing some air sealing, but the stained glass behind him says, "Fight the good fight." Thank you for that. And thank you for listening. And I'm happy to take some, I did that wrong again. I'm happy to answer some questions if anyone has any.
So maybe before we open the floor, if Ms. Reed Harris can just maybe step in and tell us about the accelerator program offerings around energy studies.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine. I am an account manager for the New York City Accelerator Program. And this program is a city-backed program that provides free technical guidance to building owners and decision makers. We have a solar specialist as an arm of the program where we look at solar feasibility for properties. All our solar specialists would need is 12 consecutive months worth of utility bill data. And they would design a preliminary assessment for your property. And if on-site generation is not feasible, we can explore options such as community solar. Another arm of the program is our finance specialist who looks at Local Law 96, which is PACE financing. And PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing. PACE financing is meant to be able to be a tool that is used for building owners to cover the cost of all energy efficiency upgrades. It is a loan, but the loan terms are usually really long, so they last anywhere between 25 to 30 years, which is usually the amount of time for the useful life of a system. For PACE financing, the loan is attached to the property tax of a building, so that's kind of special for. I see a question. So for the New York City Accelerator Program, there are no minimum sizes. Even for PACE financing and solar feasibility, there are no size minimums or maximums. So we have buildings that are as small as, I think the smallest property that I'm currently working with is probably 4,000 square feet, all the way to buildings that are millions of square feet. So there are no maximums or minimums. So going back a little bit to PACE financing, because we're talking about not-for-profits, our financial specialists will explore options such as energy service agreements or any unique situations or scenarios that a house of worship may need just because of the special requirements. And then the third arm of the program is our service provider program, where we as account managers will match building owners to various service providers that will help you complete these energy audits. Or even if you have a more recent energy audit and you have some projects or specific projects in mind, as Stephen had mentioned, some heat pumps, like if that was a project that you're interested in pursuing, we would match you with a service provider who is well equipped to design such system and help you implement that system. And that's actually a project we are working on right now. We're currently working with the First Presbyterian Church in Forest Hills, Queens. Our contact, he's interested in heat pumps. He already had an energy study prior to meeting us. So we're working with identifying service providers to help him design that system. Yes, that's exactly why we had the service provider program, because there are so many different engineering and consulting companies, especially in New York, and so many people competing, but not a lot of people actually knowing the local laws and how it's going to affect these buildings. So we specifically created the service provider program so that these service providers know the needs of these buildings, but also knows the laws enough to be able to help these buildings comply. So a little bit about the energy study programs that we usually recommend for houses of worships or any of our clients. So there are two. One of the programs is the NYSERDA FlexTech program. So we refer the NYSERDA FlexTech program to properties that are much larger.
Jasmine, can I just interrupt? Can you tell us what NYSERDA is?
Oh, yes. NYSERDA stands for the New York State. Oh, I even mess it up a little bit. New York State Research and Development Association. Sometimes I have to write out the acronyms to get the order right.
With you.
So NYSERDA is an entity that provides incentives to buildings, building owners, decision makers, anywhere between energy studies and also incentives for implementation. So for the NYSERDA FlexTech program, so it's flexible technical support, but for short, we call it the FlexTech program. That one is a 50-50 cost share, and we usually recommend this energy study to larger buildings and buildings that cannot comply or fit within the eligibility requirements of the other program that I'm going to share with you, which is the NYSERDA Green Jobs, Green New York program, and that has a eligibility cap of spending no more than $100,000 on your annual utility. So if you have a larger,
sorry, Jasmine, I have that. Can I share the flyer for the energy study?
Sure. So if you don't fit within that program, which I'll go into after, we usually recommend FlexTech as an alternative. So since Lucy has this up now, I'll talk about Green Jobs, Green New York first. So for Green Jobs, Green New York, as I mentioned, the eligibility requirement, if we look at eligible participants, that section there, for nonprofit organizations, your annual utility spent has to be $100,000 or less for you to qualify for this program. And what you'll get from this is a comprehensive walkthrough and some sort of energy study at the end of the walkthrough that will have a list of energy conservation measures that can be done on your property. And then you can use that study to help inform you on what projects are possible for your property. So if we look at the section that says customer study contribution, if you have 10 full-time equivalent employees or less, then the minimum cost of the study would be $100. And if you have over 100 full-time equivalent employees, then the most that you'd pay for the study is $500. So this is a great tool and resource for the smaller houses of worship that we work with, or the smaller commercial businesses that we work with. Now, as I mentioned, if you do not fit within the requirements of this program, then we recommend the NYSERDA FlexTech program, which I can share the flyer with you for that, Lucy, afterwards. And that program is a 50-50 cost share, where half of the cost is covered by NYSERDA and the other half would be covered by the building owner. And for that, I know a lot of questions are, well, how much does a study look like? And what I usually say is that that will depend on the company that you choose to work with. So we've seen studies, and also it depends on how intricate the building is. We've seen studies that are as small as, I want to say, $6,000-$7,000, and we've seen studies be as large as $100,000. But with that, again, it is a 50-50 cost share. So if it is as much as $100,000, then only $50,000 would be paid by the building owner. And I think these energy studies, as Stephen had started the presentation with, these energy studies are really important in helping you understand your building. If you don't know how your energy consuming equipment is operating, how efficient they are, you can't really say, well, I need a new boiler, if you don't even know how the boiler is currently operating. So we usually recommend energy studies being a very first step to give you an idea of what's going on in your building, so then you can take an informed decision to move forward and be more energy efficient. And also a good thing about the NYSERDA FlexTech program for our larger properties that are 50,000 square feet and larger, we also help with local law compliance through the New York City Accelerator program. So for buildings that are 50,000 square feet or larger, there's a local law called Local Law 87, which is auditing and retro commissioning. And you can use the FlexTech program to help you with early compliance and or your Local Law 87 compliance. So that's just another arm of the program. And I'll drop my email in the chat so that you can reach out if you're interested or have any questions.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
And I can say I found out about the New York City Accelerator program through attending a bricks and mortars event. And the customer service there is awesome, which is very rare, as we all know, dealing with the city organization. So the floor is open. Please go ahead, or maybe, I don't know if you're clapping your hands or asking a question.
Yeah, I mean, I was just clapping my hands. I'm glad that event was helpful, and the accelerator has been so helpful. They were certainly, an integral part in the events that we've put on addressing the changes in legislation that are coming for houses of faith and others in New York. But part of the reason we want to co-sponsor this event, and thank you so much for leading this and putting this together, is because these are really, like you said at the beginning, DIY solutions for houses of faith to put these into action. And I just, in listening to all the speakers, I found this really a really helpful way for folks to begin thinking about this and approaching this. And of course, again, New York City has a lot of really great resources and free resources for folks to be able to engage with as well.
Yeah, definitely. Another free resource that is available to houses of faith in New York City is the Cool Roofs program. So if you're interested in getting a white roof to help with kind of that heat absorption that might be happening, and if you have a newer roof, then that is also a free program to houses of worship that is available. So there are a lot of free resources, as Kate mentioned, and reaching out to the New York City Accelerator program, we can definitely get you in touch with the right people and the right programs.
I have a question. In terms of understanding your energy, one of the things that you both have emphasized again and again is you need to know your utility consumption over 12 months for at least a year, and ideally more than that if you're looking at COVID. So how do you get that? and this, I guess, is a question for Jasmine. How do we get those numbers?
Yeah, so another local law that New York City kind of implemented was Local Law 84, which is the benchmarking law, which requires buildings on a yearly basis to report to the city how their utilities are being used. So you're reporting that electricity consumption, you're reporting that natural gas consumption, you're reporting the if you use fuel oil on the property, you're reporting your fuel oil consumption. And that is a yearly basis just to see what kind of systems and how much of that energy is being used. And that's on a very basic level, but also, as mentioned, Local Law 87, which is mainly for larger properties, so 50,000 square feet and larger. On a 10-year basis, New York City requires those buildings to do some type of energy audit to actually look at the systems and how what kind of tune-ups need to be done and what kind of efficient measures should be recommended for the property. So that's kind of how New York City is keeping an eye on that. And for Local Law 84, as Stephen mentioned, Energy Star Portfolio Manager is something that the city also uses to really track that Local Law 84 data.
But if you're a smaller congregation and you just need to find out that utility, can you download it from Con Ed? Like, how does that process work?
You can also make an account, no matter how big your building is, you can make an account for Energy Star Portfolio Manager, and then you can reach out, you can send a connection request to Con Edison so that Con Edison can send you that aggregated data onto Energy Star Portfolio Manager, so you don't have to do that yourself. So that is also an option where you can get your utility data directly aggregated from your utility provider. So that's not only for Con Edison, that's for Natural Grid and even the DEP.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty cool because it can be super hard in other jurisdictions to access your energy data digitally, and some providers charge for it, which sucks, especially for houses of worship. So super hats off to New York City. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. Another important thing that Stephen, you mentioned was a lot of the insulation. So you had a lot of great projects, and it really made me think of all of the additional incentive programs that we have. So like Con Edison has incentives to help with insulation, pipe insulation, which is extremely important in keeping that heat loss from happening if it's with water or HVAC systems. So we also do have a lot of incentive programs to help subsidize the cost of a lot of the energy efficiency measures that Stephen presented to you all today.
Everybody,
what are the programs that are, sorry, what are the programs that are connected to Con Ed?
So for example, the Con Edison has an SMB program. So that's for small to medium sized commercial properties. And for that program, you have to be use less than 300 kilowatts of electricity. Then Con Edison also has the C&I, so commercial and industrial program, and that's for much larger. So if you use over that 300 kilowatt kind of threshold for the SMB program, and in that program, they look at lighting, they look at HVAC measures, they look at insulation, they look at heat pumps, so new technology, upcoming technology. They also have custom measures. If you have a technology that isn't listed directly on their incentives, they'll even look at making a case for newer technology. So Con Edison does have similar programs.
Would houses of faith be considered commercial?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
Yes.
great.
And the only requirement for most of these Con Edison programs are that you are a Con Edison customer. So that basically, almost everybody in New York is a Con Edison customer.
For better or for worse.
Exactly. So everybody will be able to capitalize on these incentive programs.
Brilliant. Well, we are close to the hour. So I wanted to thank our speakers. Learned so much. Thank you both. And you all should go on the road. You're a good tag team. And I also wanted to encourage you all to look at the next Lunch and Learn series that's really focusing on flood insurance. And we're just delighted to have FEMA lead that conversation. And it's about not only about house of worships, but your congregations. How much do you need? What's the difference between disaster insurance and flood insurance? Am I in a flood zone? Just we really want to get into the nuts and bolts of flood insurance. And Race Hodges, who's on this call, will be one of our discussion leaders. And I will share the link to the recording, and I'll share some of the links to the conversation. And Stephen has kindly agreed to share his deck. It's a great, what the heck is a boiler? What do you mean by insulation? It's great, great 101 tools to have these conversations with your own congregations. So before you peel off in the last minute, I would just ask you to complete this poll. And again, please, after you complete the poll, you're free to go, but this should take 2 seconds, and it will really help us to evaluate the training and do a better job where we can. So thank you all, and thanks for doing this poll as well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Lucy, and thank you.
Yeah, Jasmine, so grateful. Thank you for showing up, and we'll be in touch about more trainings. Take advantage of your kindness in the future.
Of course.